It's time for Speed77 Radio's Motorsports Madness, powered by the staff at Race Chaser Online. Today's racing news, yesterday's racing history, and now here are your hosts, Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, and Kyle Magda.
Race fans of America and across the world, as we get ready to move into the Thanksgiving holiday, before we do that, we want to come back together for a little bit more discussion and welcome you to a special Race Chaser Online production. As we go into the off-season, we'll have a little bit more fun here at the round table and kick off this edition of Mini Madness. It's not our usual Motorsports Madness special, but we definitely want to talk about the championship and wrap up a pretty impressive, improbable NASCAR season. Sprint Cup Championship race just ending a couple of hours ago, and now we get set to break it down. And we'll welcome you to the roundtable. I'm Jacob Seelman, regular host of Motorsports Madness and managing editor at Race Chaser Online. Two of my colleagues, our senior editor, Tom Baker, and host of Turn 5 Live on the Performance Motorsports Network, as well as our Northeast Dirt correspondent, Steve Ovens, sitting down with me to break it all down. And Tom, I will start with you, and wow, I don't even know really where to start with this. I guess the beginning of this race would be a great place to do so, but I think the end of the race is the one that tells the entire story, because this night was all about the most improbable of comebacks and a driver who doesn't know when to give up. Kyle Busch, on a restart with 7 to go, gets around Brad Keselowski, wins the race, and for the second year in a row, we have a walk-off home run, or the equivalent of, win the Sprint Cup Championship. He missed 11 races at the start of the season because of a broken foot, a broken leg, a crash at Daytona. Now, a baby, a recovery period, and 5 wins later, he's a Sprint Cup champion at long last.
Yeah, and you really have the sense at this point in his life that he's just basically hit the life lottery, don't you? I mean, at the end of the day, when I look at this and I watched him in Victory Lane and I listened to his interviews that he did both in Victory Lane and then on the post-race show, it really seems like Kyle has found, and I think he said this actually using this language, he's found the happy place. And, he's really matured over this year. I think the crash played a part in that, and all the time off that he had. I think he realized just what a privilege it is to be doing what he's doing. I think, obviously, being married and having the baby certainly played a big part in that. This really was the year it just all came together for Kyle. And when you look at it, having spotted the rest of the competition, 11 races, I know there are a lot of people who are looking at this as if he isn't supposed to be the champion or shouldn't be the champion because he didn't run all the races. But you know what? This is the format that we have. And the simple fact of the matter is that NASCAR, whether anyone likes it or not, has tried to make this more of a team sport and tried to model what they're doing more after the other team sports like football and baseball. If your quarterback goes out for 5 or 6 weeks with an injury and then comes back and you make a big run to the Super Bowl and win it, nobody complains because your quarterback didn't play all the games. And this is really what we're trying to do now with NASCAR, is we're trying to make this more of a team sport, Jacob. And I think that in that sense, this is really what that looks like. This is a little bit of a glimpse into what I think NASCAR is trying to do here. Kyle Busch missed 11 races, still came back, won 4 races, and then has just won this race, of course, for the 5th win of the year, and did everything he needed to do to win this championship. I think it's just an amazing accomplishment, honestly. And he and the Joe Gibbs Racing team really put it all together this year and should be proud of themselves as far as I'm concerned. I think he has earned the right to call himself a champion, and I'm going to be very interested to see how this looks going forward, because you know what, Jacob, I think his best years at this point are in front of him, because now that he has matured, I really honestly think this won't be his last championship. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of Kyle Busch, just like a lot of Joey Logano, going forward over the next few years. They're probably the two drivers who are most likely to become the next two big things in NASCAR Sprint Cup racing for the next, 3 to 5, 10 years.
I think I compared it to the Sprint Cup Series is about to see what the Xfinity and Camping World truck ranks have known for the last 5 or 6 years, or something to that effect a little bit earlier. And Steve Ovens, I turn to you as well, because you were one of the first ones that I saw after the checkered flag flew that said, whether you like him, love him, or hate him, you gotta respect what he did, because Kyle Busch flat earned this championship. And it wasn't like he just hit the button when the time was right on this final restart. More than half of this 267-lap race on Sunday afternoon into the night, he was the top running of the 4 chase contenders. Yeah, for a little bit, Kevin Harvick was out in front. Yeah, for a little bit, Jeff Gordon was out in front. And even at one point, Martin Truex was out in front. All 4 guys took turns at the front of the field. But for more than 200 miles on this day, Kyle Busch was the man in charge. And at the end, he proved what he's best at in this Sprint Cup Series, and that's restarts. There were 4 different times today I saw him go up the middle, to the inside, to the outside, 3, or in one case 4 wide, to go either to the lead or right to a point where he could get to the lead on a restart, and he had the money restart at the end of that race in the final 7 laps.
Well, he did, and I have a couple of viewpoints on this, Jacob, is, Kyle Busch took him to the woodshed tonight, and that should not really surprise anybody. This was a typical, in my view, this was a typical Kyle Busch race. You lead more than half the race, or you're running up front of the top 4 chase contenders, which was the objective tonight. Winning the race would be a bonus, but more importantly, you needed to be in front of the other 3 chase contenders, and that's exactly what he did tonight. And, a couple of observations, about this is, my first observation, guys, is where did Rowdy Busch go? Because this is not and Tom, you spoke to this is not the Kyle Busch that started at such a young age in the Sprint Cup Series. This is not the Kyle Busch that walked away from interviews and left the racetrack before his car was even clarified as being out of the race. This is a completely different driver, and it's kind of scary, Jacob, to think about the fact that Tom says that, and you guys agree that his best years are ahead of him. He's got 150 wins across the top 3 series. When you got 150 wins across the top 3 series, and you have folks in the media saying that your best days are still ahead of you, my goodness, what a statement that is.
It is, and the thing that strikes me is when you say, where did Rowdy Busch go? What happened to Rowdy Busch? Rowdy Busch has morphed into relaxed Busch. And when I think at the point where you start talking about relaxed Busch, you start talking about really hard to beat Busch. And both Kyle and Kurt this year have really become that sort of a driver, I think, over the course of the season. I think we're going to see both of the Busch brothers have some tremendous success over the next several years. I think that Kyle Busch has finally come to a point, Jacob, in his racing where he feels like everything, and not just even with his racing, but with his life in general, he feels like everything is in order. And now he can just relax and go out and concentrate on winning. And if you gave him a full season this year, I wonder how many more races he would have won. I mean, I think that when you look at the way that team performed and you understand that, that car really likely, had Kyle been in it the entire season, would have run just like it has since he came back. I think we might have seen Kyle win 7 or 8 races this year. And, I think this is going to be a really tough combination. He and Adam Stevens really clicked, guys. And, more importantly than that, I think the entire Joe Gibbs racing team took a huge step forward over the course of this year. Now what's going to be interesting, Jacob, is to see what happens next year when you go to the new package to see if they can dial the cars in and be up front and be in contention. But this is a new Kyle Busch. This is a much more relaxed, much more confident, and not confident in the sense that he doubted himself before, but I think quietly confident. He's much more controlled. This is a Kyle Busch who's much more focused and determined because he knows that it can go away in an instant. So, this is a Kyle Busch, I think, that's going to become a leader in this organization and in this sport. And I think he's going to handle himself very well as a champion, and I'm looking forward to seeing him hit the talk show circuit because I think he's going to be very entertaining to watch.
Oh, he was certainly handling himself quite well. And, you said relaxed. I saw that, and I saw him really enjoying and savoring this celebration as he made his way to the championship stage tonight, Tom. And you talk about savoring the celebration. I'm having a little fun in championship fashion. I've got my Monster Energy sitting here. I've got some M&M's Crispy, and I've got a Snickers. So I think Kyle would be pretty proud of that celebration. Give the sponsors some love. But, we'll continue talking a little bit more about this. Of course, tonight was Jeff Gordon's final ride, and we'll get into all that as well as some of the other action from the weekend in Homestead right after a word from a couple of our great Race Chaser Online supporters. So stay with us. We continue our discussion on this edition of Mini Madness, a Race Chaser Online podcast, right after this.
For 17 years, Stock Car Steel has been a leading materials supplier to the racing industry. We're proud they're a motorsports content partner here at Race Chaser Online. The biggest names in NASCAR trust Stock Car Steel for raw materials such as carbon steel, chrome moly, DOM, aluminum, plastics, and much more. You can't build a race car without the basic materials, and Stock Car Steel is the place to get them. Don't forget to also visit Stock Car Steel's sister company, SRI Supplies, for racing and industry. SRI is the place to go for all your shop supply needs. Nuts, bolts, rivets, tapes, adhesives, cutting tools, chemicals, body shop supplies, paint shop supplies, lubricants, and more. A well-stocked race shop is a winning race shop, and the path to winning begins with 3 letters, SRI. For more information, visit stockcarsteel.com or SRI-supplies.com. Check them both out on Facebook or call them toll-free at 1-888-752-7272, 1-888-752-7272.
You're listening to the Performance Motorsports Network, your authority on motorsports of all types. Be listening for the most accurate and up-to-the-minute coverage of every motorsports activity that you enjoy on a daily basis. Be it NASCAR, be it IRL, be it Formula One, be it drag racing, be it dirt track, off-road, props, hulls, whatever. We are your source for motorsport. Performance Motorsports Network. We now return you to 2.5 Men on Speed77 Radio's Motorsports Madness on the Performance Motorsports Network.
And we bring you back to the Race Chaser Online Roundtable. Welcome back. Mini Madness going on in the wake of the 2015 NASCAR Sprint Cup Series Championship race, the Ford EcoBoost 400. Wrapping up tonight, Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, Steve Ovens breaking it all down. And Steve-O, I want to turn to you now on this one because you have been a very much a watcher of Hendrick Motorsports for a long time in your time following NASCAR. And I know even if you weren't a Hendrick Motorsports fan, you were on this night because everybody had their eyes on Jeff Gordon and everybody was appreciating Jeff Gordon in what was his 797th and last NASCAR Sprint Cup Series start tonight. All of them consecutive since the last race in 1992. Tonight, he goes out with a shot to win the championship. They fought with this car all night long. It was never quite where he wanted it. He took the lead at one point early, but as he said in his post-race interview, gosh, when the sun went down, our car just went away, and we could never quite find it again until that very last run. And he says, man, if it had run like that, how it was in that final restart for about the last 100 laps, we might have been able to do something with them. I'm a little disappointed in this, but, He said, it's been fun and it's been a dream come true thanks to Mr. Hendrick. I said that it was the class that Jeff Gordon's shown for 23 years, and it was in that moment where I think it finally hit me. We go to Daytona in February, and this guy's going to be in a broadcast suit. We finally watched the last race with Jeff Gordon in a Sprint Cup car, and, he went out, like he said, with a shot to win this championship, and that's all you can ask.
I really think that, he had a shot to win this at Homestead. But, guys, I look back to Martinsville, and I look at that celebration and everything there, and I really think that anything they could have done at Homestead would have been a bonus. I really felt that win at Martinsville was the appropriate way to think of Jeff Gordon as he drives off into retirement. He took another win at Martinsville, got another grandfather clock at a track that he's owned over the course of his career and has taught so many other drivers how to own that place. And, for them to come back in 6th, we watched him run back there in 12th and 13th, and I sat back and I said, man, I hope this isn't how Jeff goes out, running 12th or 13th place and running about 4th among the Chase 4. But then all of a sudden, that last run, we saw the old Jeff Gordon come back. We saw the kid from California who then lived in Indiana in race sprint cars and open wheel, and we saw a 44-year-old driver get up on the wheel and give it everything he had until the checkered flag flew. And so you take that memory, you take the memories of Martinsville, and the great part that you just mentioned, Jacob, is we're not losing the guy. Jeff Gordon's going to be up in the booth. He's going to do a great job. I can't wait to hear his insight. He's going to breathe a huge breath of fresh air into the NASCAR on Fox broadcast team. And I'll tell you what a way to go out for this guy. And the partnership between Jeff Gordon and Rick Hendrick. There's not much more you can say than that.
Oh, there's really not. And Tom, I felt like it was so sweet and so appropriate that he gets out of the car, and I can look at it and say it was meant to be. The first person over to him before he could even turn around and react, grabs him for a hug, is, of course, Mr. Hendrick himself. And that was a moment, I think, that epitomized all that this man has meant, not just to that team, but to NASCAR as a whole. And, when you can even get TV and NBC Sports to stop and just kind of put everything on hold for a second and appreciate that moment for what it was, I think spoke volumes. And to hear the emotion in his voice about being disappointed at not being able to be any better than they were, but, just being thankful to have had a shot, and really had a shot for the 23 years that he's been a part of the sport. Jeff Gordon leaves a legacy that anybody that comes after him, if they can live up to half of it, they'll have something to have been extremely proud about, and that says a lot.
Well, in terms of the race today, I think it's interesting, and I think it's probably apropos in a sense. Today was a little bit of a microcosm of the entire season for really all of Hendrick Motorsports. They were just a step behind, and that really has been the case for the entire year. Penske's been better, Joe Gibbs has been better, Stuart Haas has been better, and today it was much of the same. But I think that what Steve said about Jeff winning at Martinsville, that moment, that celebration, there were some demons gone that afternoon, I think, for Jeff. He had that one last opportunity to enjoy the fruits of victory, and he put himself in position to go out on top. Whether or not he won the championship, he was in the chase and in the Final Four, so he was one of the 4 guys that had a shot at it, and I think that's all he could have asked for. And I thought about the Martinsville win a little bit earlier and was thinking that he's got enough clocks so that if he had one clock set to Eastern time, one to Central, one to Mountain, one to Pacific, he could literally say it's 5 o'clock somewhere in every different time zone. It's pretty funny the amount of grandfather clocks that man has accumulated, but what an icon for the sport. And he's got so much left to give, I think, Steve. You said it. He's going to breathe a breath of fresh air into the NASCAR on Fox broadcasts. I really believe that Jeff Gordon is going to have just as much of an impact on the sport as a broadcaster as he has as a driver. I think he and DW in the booth are going to be fun to listen to. He'll fit right in there. And more importantly, I think he's going to be a great ambassador to the sport in other ways. There's so much that he's involved with that people don't realize through his foundation and some of the other endeavors that he has. I think he's going to be great for Hendrick Motorsports as, a manager type and an advisor and, of course, a mentor for Chase Elliott. And I think he's going to be a phenomenal broadcaster. Jeff Gordon certainly has had an iconic career, and I think his career after driving is going to be just as iconic, and I think it's great that he's still going to be so active and so much a part of the sport, because I know, Steve, that he still loves the sport. He just felt like it was time to move on and put the helmet away and do something different, and I think he probably would have had a choice of any number of different roles, that he might have wanted to play, but the broadcasting to me seems perfect. The advisor role at Hendrick, the mentor for Chase Elliott, all of those things are things that Jeff can do very well and still continue to be very involved in the sport on his terms.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom, and it was also interesting, right after the race. Of course, Rick Hendrick is the first guy to the car to give Jeff a big hug and thank each other for all of the years. And it was really kind of symbolic for me, Jacob, because you had Rick Hendrick was the first one to the car to give him a hug to close the chapter of Jeff Gordon as a driver. And then immediately next, you have Ella and Leo step in, his children, who he's now going to get to spend so much time with and not only be a NASCAR broadcaster, but be a dad. And I know that that's something that he's so looking forward to. And I loved how symbolic that was post-race of closing the chapter as a driver, opening the chapter as more of a full-time dad, and now NASCAR broadcaster.
Absolutely right. And how soon we forget, Tom, and really this is the other side of the coin. I think you talk about some of the young guys stepping up to start to fill that void as Jeff takes his final ride into the sunset. We almost saw that in the final 20-lap run to the finish if it wasn't for the late race caution for debris, which was actually debris despite all the detractors that say it was a water bottle or something like that. Wake up and take a look at the camera footage, people. There was a 6-inch piece of metal on the front straightaway underneath the flag stand that the drivers were coming over the scanners and screaming for NASCAR to throw the caution. It was legit, but it did rob Kyle Larson of what I thought, Tom, was going to be a first Sprint Cup victory. The boy won the Xfinity race on Saturday, and doggone, he had a rocket ship.
Yeah, how ironic that at a moment when Jeff Gordon is passing the proverbial torch of the 24 car to Chase Elliott, that we would see the emergence of Kyle Larson as a potential winner this afternoon, almost as if to say, hey, don't forget about me over here. He won yesterday, as you pointed out, in the Xfinity Series race, and looked like he certainly had a shot today. And you're right, there is some real outstanding young talent in Sprint Cup, and of course Chase Elliott coming into Sprint Cup. Jeff Gordon really started that trend all of those years ago. He was the first young gun, if you will, Davey Allison really kind of gets credit as being the first quote unquote driver development driver in NASCAR, which Davey was a product of Lauren Lanier and Lanier Racing. But, Jeff Gordon was the first real young gun to come in from outside of the Beltway, so to speak. And now you've got all these other drivers who the door has been opened for because of Jeff Gordon. And so when we look at what NASCAR is today with all of the younger racers coming in and having such quick success, we can owe a lot of that to what Jeff Gordon was able to do back in the early 90s. And I think Kyle Larson's a great example of a driver who's got a very bright future ahead of him. Chip Ganassi nearly put 2 in the chase this year and just missed on both counts. But I think as that team continues to build and grow, those 2 drivers, both Kyle Larson and Jamie McMurray, who I know isn't a young gun necessarily anymore, but just to say that team, I think, is a team that we're going to have to look out for as we go forward. But yeah, great job, Kyle Larson, and certainly a fine example of kind of the modern age Jeff Gordon type racer, very young, very aggressive, a little bit brash, but certainly a driver who doesn't lack confidence. And I think as he matures a little bit, you're going to start seeing Kyle Larson win more races in the Sprint Cup Series. And I could definitely see him at some point becoming a championship race car driver over there with Chip Ganassi Racing.
I do agree with that. I'm going to go so far as to say I think he makes the chase in 2016, but that's a discussion for another day. I want to turn the chapter back just a few minutes and talk a little bit about the other championships that were decided as well on Friday and Saturday. First, the truck race on Friday night. It was a pretty good weekend if you were Kyle Busch, Tom. Eric Jones delivers Kyle Busch Motorsports their first ever drivers' championship. Kyle, a champion on the owner's side of the Truck Series for the 4th time and the 3rd consecutive year. Just an unbelievable job that 19-year-old has done. Youngest champion in Truck Series history. And you want to talk about the Cup Series having a bright future with some of the talent. The lower ladders have equal talent, if not, going to make the Cup Series even better when it gets close to 2017, 2018. Eric Jones is on a meteoric rise, and the job he did all season long, but even to hold it together and do exactly what he had to do when Matt Crafton was going up and winning the race, just impressive to say the least.
Yes, it really was. I think, again, Eric is another example of a driver who really shows the talent to be a champion at a very high level. We saw it in the way that he handled himself down the stretch here with the trucks. And then also, I think we've seen flashes of that championship pedigree in the way that he's handled himself when he's had to fill in the Cup Series a few times this year. He's really done a phenomenal job. He's, again, a process of maturation took place from the beginning of the year to the end of the year in terms of his attitude and the way that he handled adversity. I think Eric Jones is a driver who could very easily go out next year and win an Xfinity Series title. And I'm not going to say that he would go straight to Cup and win the Cup Series title the following year, but certainly he's a driver who's capable of being the first one to win all 3. And, I think that he certainly has an opportunity here now to really make his way fairly quickly to the Cup Series. I could see him for sure, Jacob, racing a minimum number of Cup races next year, whatever is allowed by the rules to keep him as a rookie.
7.
Contender. 7, yeah. And then, of course, if he does well enough in Xfinity, I could see him in a full schedule of Cup races the following year if there's an opportunity for him to do that with one of the Toyota teams. But he's definitely, it's been really enjoyable to watch him. I think it was shortly after Charlotte where he finally he kind of let all that pressure roll off his back a little bit and just started to take each race as it comes and not to get so far down about the bad luck and not really to get so far, up with the success. He kind of learned to stay at medium. And once he did that, boy, he really exploded over the last couple months of the year and just he earned every bit of the championship, Steve, for sure. I think Eric Jones is a driver who's got a very bright future in this sport, and it's going to happen pretty quickly in front of us.
I agree with you, Tom, and I think it's so appropriate that he is learning and coming up through the ranks from the driver who Jacob just won the Sprint Cup title. I mean, would you rather have your young rising star learning from anybody else?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, it's you look at this and go, the future is very bright. Oh, yes, it is on all fronts. And, I want to turn back to you now, Steve, because you talk about young rising stars, and we even saw that on Saturday with the Xfinity Series. You've got Chase Elliott finishing second in the championship, going to take over for Jeff Gordon now in that 24 car going into the 2016 season. But give a call to the guy that won the championship and led the title race for 24 straight weeks to close the season in Chris Buescher. Won that race at Iowa, took the points lead, and never gave it up again. Roush Fenway Racing didn't have anything to smile about on the Cup side, but gosh darn, this 23-year-old kid, he's been mighty impressive and, brings Texas a Xfinity championship and does that team proud because they may not have won the most races this season, but they were by far and away the most consistent team all year long, and there's something to be said for that, I think, for sure.
Yes, there was a driver back in the day, as they say, Jacob, in the Ford camp, a guy by the name of Mark Martin, who was a perfect example of how consistency can lead you into a title chase. I know Mark never was able to pull that effort off on his own in the Cup Series, but he was an example of a driver that shows if you go out, you be consistent, you win a race or two here or there, and you're constantly there. It's like a good dose of Novocaine. You just got to be there. You got to be there every week. You've got to be pulling in those top 10s on the days when the car feels like it's going to run 20th or 30th, and somehow you manage to scrape together a top 10. Those points days, you add them all together at the end of the season, and that's what can win you a championship. And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty impressed with this team because for the last month or so, I thought they were just finding ways that they were going to give this championship away. I really didn't know that if they were really going to pull this off on Saturday. But, they certainly proved all the naysayers wrong. They got the job done. And you know what? Good for Chris Buescher because this is a driver that, I still think needs some more grooming, and he could really turn into a great Cup driver for Roush Fenway someday.
I think so, and there's a lot of talk, Tom, that they don't know exactly what he's doing next year, but it could involve some Cup races. It could involve defending that Xfinity championship. So we'll just have to wait and see. He even admitted openly in the post-race press conference on Saturday he doesn't know what he's doing just yet. But, I think a run like he had this year ought to at least qualify him for consideration for a few Cup races because he's proven even, making 6 starts in the Front Row Motorsports Ford this season. He's proven that he can run with the best of them, and he brought that car to a top 20 finish in a season where Brett Moffitt, who, oh, by the way, was crowned Rookie of the Year at the end of the night tonight, couldn't even get it in the top 35 a lot of weeks.
Well, Buescher's in a rather interesting position, isn't he? And I think this is a little bit of what, when we look ahead, maybe a year with Eric Jones to where he may be sitting for the 2017 season, it's kind of similar in some ways in the sense that we don't know. The only thing that could be possible there would be a fourth Roush Fenway team. And again, we have no knowledge that that's even being discussed or that there are any partners in terms of corporate partners that would be a part of that. He could, of course, go run for Front Row. There's been talk that Front Row may be changing manufacturers, so that could affect whether or not we would see Chris Buescher lining up over there. I think there is determination on Front Row's part to improve their performance and their competitiveness in Cup. So with that being the case, certainly I think where they end up in terms of manufacturers is going to determine whether Buescher would even go there or not. But at the end of all of this, I think Chris has another option, which is there's nothing wrong with staying in Xfinity and racing for another championship. Chase Elliott did it for a couple of years, and I don't think it hurt him any. I think it's only going to help him when he gets to Cup. I don't think it would be a bad thing at all if Chris Buescher returned to the Xfinity Series, Jacob, with Roush Fenway to try to defend that championship the same way Chase did this year with Junior Motorsports. And in fact, at this point, it may be his best option because he could be competitive and run for a championship in the Xfinity Series. Right now, Jack Roush's Cup program just doesn't have championship speed or championship performance. So, it might not be a bad thing for Chris to sit right where he is if, in fact, that's, possible for him in that organization. I would think that, he could be just fine to come back and run the Xfinity Series again next year.
And when we come back, we're going to have a few more quick words here, and we'll continue in just a moment by breaking down the runs of the other championship contenders on the Cup side and get a quick preview on what we want to look forward to in 2016. That after these words, you're listening to Mini Madness, a Race Chaser Online podcast, as we break down the final weekend of the NASCAR season in Homestead. We'll be right back.
The odds of a young girl being discovered by an industry insider while singing to herself pumping gas? 1 in 300 million. The odds of the daughter of a clergyman from Severn, Maryland spending 11 weeks at number 1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of going on to win 6 Grammy Awards? 1 in 1.4 million. The odds of selling over 40 million records? 1 in 800,000. The odds of this musician and performer having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference. Autism Speaks. It's time to listen. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council.
If you're a gearhead and you just can't get enough of your favorite motorsports on that channel on the cable, or you look at that Guy network and you just go, what does that have to do with me? We have the answer. Performance Motorsports Network. Right here on the internet. The best cruising tunes, the best in motorsports programming, and the best shows. We have opinionated hosts, and we like it that way. If you want to get involved, if you want to bench race, be listening for information coming up soon right here on this channel, the Performance Motorsports Network, your source for motorsports. Time to get back to tonight's Motorsports Madness. Here are the only three of a kind that beats a full house. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, and Kyle Magda.
Welcome back as we continue to break down the final weekend of the NASCAR season in Homestead, Miami. We bring you into Mini Madness, offshoot of our regular Motorsports Madness radio show. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, Steve Ovens sitting around the Race Chaser round table. And, we've been talking all about Kyle Busch, Tom. We hit a little bit on Jeff Gordon, and there were two other guys in this championship fight as well. Of course, the defending champ, Kevin Harvick, who gave it a very mighty effort in the closing laps, got to second on the final restart, and just couldn't track down Kyle Busch, and finishes second, sets a modern era record, 13 runner-up finishes this season. And if you want to put a label on this one, I think I've got the New York Times headline, Second just wasn't good enough.
Well, there's nothing wrong with 13 seconds. That's a baker's dozen.
Well, Kevin Harvick thinks so. He didn't get a championship by finishing second.
Well, yeah, but you know what he did get, though? He got the most consistent award. Unfortunately, this format lends itself to the championship being decided in one race, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't care for that. Personally, I love it. I think it puts a great deal of emphasis on this final event, and I think we've seen 2 years in a row that you have to win it in order to win it, and Kevin Harvick just didn't quite have enough today. Kyle Busch was better, and Kyle flat out beat him. Kevin had a shot at the end on that last restart. He could have passed him. He just couldn't stay with him. So, unfortunately for the Harvick fans, they're not going to get to celebrate 2 in a row, but you know what? That team has nothing to be ashamed of. They had a phenomenal season, and I think more interestingly, we don't want to minimize this too much. That was also today the end of an era of sorts for Kevin Harvick and that team, because next year you aren't going to be seeing Budweiser on the car. At least not to the degree that it has been in the past, because Anheuser-Busch switching to the Busch brand and bringing Busch beer back as the main sponsor for that particular team. So the livery on that car going to change a little bit, and we're going to be talking about, instead of the Budweiser Chevrolet, it's going to be the Busch beer Chevrolet or the Busch Light Chevrolet, and that even is going to be a little bit different to get used to, but again, something that's kind of an iconic brand from the past that could really give that team a little bit of a unique lift going into 2016 to try and win a championship for the Busch brand. And I certainly wouldn't count them out of it. I don't think Kevin Harvick's going anywhere for a while. He's going to be a championship contender for several years to come. And again, I think that team is probably, arguably, over the course of a 36-race season, that team has been for 2 straight years the team to beat. And, it's really amazing, honestly, what they've accomplished. So, didn't quite get it done, but I don't think there's any shame in second, the way that they've run all year long, and I certainly think that we'll be looking at them running right back up front next year as well.
I agree with that. And Steve, I wanted to hand you the other guy who made a valiant effort, and even though we're not talking about him winning a championship, should have no shame in putting together not only the best season run of his Sprint Cup career, but the best run for the little team that could, as they've called it, Furniture Row Racing, Martin Truex Jr. They struggled mightily tonight and really could only muster about a 12th place finish. That was where they sat for almost half the race, honestly. They just never really had what they needed to drive up there and contend. The Cole Pern, that team, tried to pull strategy, used a couple of 2-tire calls that got him up there for a little bit, but it just seemed like they faded and didn't have it on this night. But for a single car team to do what they did this year, make the chase, contend, finish 4th, best effort for the driver and team in both of their NASCAR Sprint Cup careers, it's a feel-good story with a great ending and a great hook going into 2016. I truly believe this is a team that can replicate that success next year because they've built a fantastic foundation to build from.
I agree with you. First, let's tackle, their run tonight. And unfortunately for these guys, I think this was a situation of a team that they really started behind this weekend. They struggled with the car. I watched some of the practice, final practice on Saturday, and you could tell that they were just off. They were missing something. I don't know what that was, because they've had so many good runs this season that you thought, with such a focus on this championship race, that they would they would really come out with guns blazing, and they were just a tick off. They weren't far off, but it took a two-tire strategy that, you were really having to bank on a 5 to 10 lap run to have that work out to get them the track position that they needed to give them a chance to race for the championship. And again, they needed a 5 or 10 lap run, and they went almost an entire green flag cycle. It was just that kind of weekend for these guys. Unfortunately for Martin Truex and Furniture Row, it wasn't in the cards this weekend, but they came out, I think, and proved everything that they needed to prove this weekend. And I do wonder, Jacob, how different things could be in the future for these guys with manufacturer support. Not only is this the little team that could, this is the little team that could without the manufacturer support behind them. Now as they move to Toyota and they have some more support behind them from their car manufacturer, I do wonder, boy, sky could be the limit for these guys going forward.
Yeah, did we mention that they're joining technical forces with the team, Tom, that just won the Sprint Cup championship? That's got to be cause for celebration.
Well, I was going to point that out because I think there's just a lot of irony in what's gone on over the last couple of days. I mean, Kyle Busch wins a driver's championship for the first time in the Truck Series with his team, then goes and wins his first Sprint Cup championship as a driver with Joe Gibbs, the driver that won Kyle the championship in the Truck Series on Friday, is now going to go after an Xfinity Series championship for Joe Gibbs next year, Eric Jones, and of course Martin Truex and the 78 team going from Chevrolet to Toyota next year. And I think that is going to make all the difference for that organization. And again, talk about 2, maybe even 3 cars in that outfit as they go forward. Not next year, but in the future. I certainly think that organization has primed itself to take a giant step into elite status. And if you think about it, Jacob, if you just look at the way that the NASCAR Sprint Cup is kind of expanded over the last couple of years in terms of competition, for the longest time, it was all about Hendrick Motorsports. You'd have the occasional challenge from a Penske or a Joe Gibbs car or a car from another organization, but it was really about Hendrick and or about Roush on the Ford side. Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen Penske just explode onto the scene with Keselowski winning the title, and then Joey Logano stepping up now to where he's at. And Joe Gibbs this year has been just amazingly good and consistent across the board with their cars. And so you're starting to see some of these teams really step up their game. Even Ganassi, as the season is wound down, started to look like a bit of a different organization over there, and they had 2 first-year crew chiefs. So, this is really I think what you're going to see going forward here is a bit of an expansion to where more and more of these teams like Furniture Row are able to race equally with the likes of the Hendricks. And, unfortunately, we've lost Michael Waltrip Racing, but I think on the Toyota side of things, Jacob, Furniture Row is going to fill that void very nicely. And it wouldn't surprise me to see, if we don't see a second car in 16, I certainly think we would see at least one more car in that outfit in 17. And I think that could be a possible place for Eric Jones if he were ready that quickly to go to Cup. And if none of the Joe Gibbs Cup racers had retired by then, I think you could very well see Eric Jones in a Furniture Row car until there's an opening with Joe Gibbs Racing to run Cup over there.
Yeah, by the way, Steve, I want you to be able to talk on this for a minute, since it was something you were following before the drop of the green flag and, really kind of had a vested interest in watching until it all broke loose about lap 40, because this was the final race for Michael Waltrip Racing as an organization. And, before we even get 75 miles into this race, we snap our fingers and kaboom, away they go in a gigantic multi-car crash. Started when Ty Dillon and Clint Boyer got together, and it ended with Boyer and Reagan all torn up among Casey Mears and Eric Almirola, and really at the end of it, it just seemed like it was a microcosm of everything that team has been through over the course of their 9-season tenure at the Cup level. And quite honestly, as tough as it is to say, almost, I don't want to say a fitting end, but maybe an expected end for all they've been through.
Well, it's like you just said. It was a microcosm of Michael Waltrip Racing, and it's not just recently. I mean, I know a lot of folks turn to Richmond circa 2013, and the cloud that put over this team, and how many dominoes fell in a bad way for this team after Richmond 2013, but. You're absolutely right. You were spot on. I mean, today, not even 100 miles into this race, and both of their cars are badly damaged. And for Boyer, I mean, I thought Boyer's quotes were, he felt the same way. He is just strictly looking forward to next year, because this has not been, I'm sure that when Boyer came to Michael Waltrip Racing, brought 5 Hour Energy with him. They were winning races. They were really setting up to be a team that was going to compete at the level of a Joe Gibbs Racing under that Toyota umbrella. And then, again, you go back to Richmond and the whole thing blows up. Truex loses his ride, which, as you look at it today, you think, well, maybe, that was the best thing that happened to Truex's career, even though it was a terrible thing at the time. But, you're right, Jay. It's just a microcosm of the history that has been Michael Waltrip Racing and NASCAR. And the thing about it is I hate that, because I feel like Mikey is just one of the good guys in the sport. Is another guy that has contributed, I think, just as much, maybe not more, as a commentator as he did as a driver. And, unfortunate to see this team go out that way. But I think for all of them, for all the staff, all of the employees that have been laid off in this process, and for drivers like David Reagan and certainly driver like Clint Boyer, and with what Martin Truex Jr. did today with Furniture Row, I think this is going to be a fresh start for everybody, and really lets everybody get back on even footing as we start 2016.
And speaking of 2016, Tom, I'll let you go first, and then Steve. What are we excited about now as we go into the winter and already start prepping for 2016? We're only 90 days away from the Daytona 500. What are you excited about, Tom? We got a new rules package. We've got new drivers. We've got new faces in new places. It's a whole new ball game going into next year, and I think I'm excited about it.
Well, I'm excited about it too. I think the new rules package is certainly going to produce some more exciting racing, which is always a plus, and I think something that's been needed for a while. I have been saying for years that we have become way too aero dependent with the stock cars, and I think the fact that we're going to reduce aero, reduce drag, we're going to make these cars more driver focused again. I think that's going to be a great thing. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited that NASCAR has somewhat stabilized the schedule such that the tracks are pretty much, we know where they're going to be and what's going on as far as the racetracks go, where we're going to be racing for the next few years. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about the TV package and the new changes that are going on there. I think NBC Sports has really stepped up over the course of this year and grown into the part of covering NASCAR, and surely with Jeff Gordon going over to Fox, that's going to give us a little bit of new life to listen to at Daytona and for the first part of the season. More importantly, though, I think I'm just excited that it seems to me that finally, for the first time, Jacob, NASCAR seems to be open to listening to the fans and to listening to the drivers and to be trying to, pardon me, help shape the sport in a way that doesn't just originate out of the hallowed halls of Daytona Beach or Charlotte in the NASCAR offices, but actually comes as the result of feedback from the drivers and from the fans as well. The hard part with the fans is you're never going to get all of them to agree on anything. Everybody wants something different, and it depends on who your favorite driver is or when you started to watch NASCAR or whether you like the chase or don't like the chase, and all of that we can discuss all of that on other shows. But I think NASCAR should be lauded at least for starting to reach out to the other principals in the sport to try and improve the product and make it more interesting and entertaining. And that's where we're at these days. We need to be entertained, and we need the entertainment to be in short bursts, and we need things to be done in a certain way. And I think NASCAR is definitely on the right track. So 2016 should be a very interesting season. And as you say, some new faces, new places. We can discuss that on other shows later on. But I'm excited just to have a little bit of a break to enjoy the holidays, and then of course to get things started with preseason thunder and all of the media things that happened in January and early February. We'll be right back at it again and talking about Daytona.
I think what this season showed us, guys, is that you have to expect the unexpected. It would take us 3 shows to try and document all the twists and turns that this season has taken. But what I think, and I look forward to next year, is the continuation of this chase format and how drivers are qualifying into the chase and what happens during the chase. I think that, Kevin Harvick last year, Kyle Busch this year, I really think that, this proves that, not only do you have to run well all season long, you need to get a win to get in, but you have to do all of the right things all the way through the chase. You have to, as the last 2 seasons have proven, and I think this is what NASCAR was going for. You got to win the championship race to win the title. And how appropriate is that, guys? I mean, that is what NASCAR was after, and this is what they've got the last 2 years in a row, and it's been a phenomenal product on both as a fan, as a media member, and I'm looking forward just to seeing more of the same next year because we've got a great on-track product right now. Like you said, Tom, you're not going to make everybody happy, and everybody is certainly showing their opinions on social media, this evening after Kyle Busch won his first NASCAR Sprint Cup title. But at the end of the day, the racing is good, and actually the racing is going to get better next year with that rules package. So there's a lot to look forward to, and I really think, guys, 2016 we're going to see another first-time Sprint Cup champion. I won't pinpoint who that will be, but this format lends itself to, we're not going to see runs of 6 in a row from Jimmy Johnson anymore. We're not going to see, strings of championships in a row. I think those days are gone, guys.
I do agree with that, and boy, Steve's going ahead and making the call. A new champion in 2016. We've seen it the last 2 years. Will we see it next year? We will find out in February when the renewal of the Daytona 500 kicks off 2016. For now, we've had a lot of fun breaking down the finale to 2015. And again, congratulations to the 3 NASCAR champions, Eric Jones in the Truck Series, Chris Buescher in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and Kyle Busch on his Sprint Cup championship here in Homestead, Miami. 3 first-time champions to close off 2015. It doesn't get much better than that. Right now, though, for Tom Baker, Steve Ovens, our partners at the Performance Motorsports Network, and the rest of our staff, including Kyle Magda, who was on the ground for RaceChaserOnline.com at Homestead, Miami, I'm Jacob Seelman, reminding all you race fans out there, keep it off the wall until we meet again, and we just might see you at the racetrack. It may be a long winter, but the new season will be here before you know it. We are back on Monday, 1 week from now, to kick off a new round of Motorsports Madness on the Performance Motorsports Network. Until then, have a safe racing weekend. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Motorsports Madness with the Speed77 Radio Race Chaser Online crew. Stay tuned to Performance Motorsports Network for more race talk. For the latest motorsports news, visit racechaseronline.com. Motorsports Madness is a copyrighted production of the Performance Motorsports Network. www.performancemotorsportsnetwork.com. A member of the Scorpion Radio Group, Inc., and may not be rebroadcast, replicated, or saved in any media without the explicit written permission of PMN. Check out our Facebook page or our section on the PMN website. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the host, co-host, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of the management and ownership of either the Performance Motorsports Network or Scorpion Radio Group Incorporated, the advertisers, or the marketing partners. Be listening again next week when the madness returns on Monday night at 7 Eastern. Until then, keep it off the wall and keep the shiny side up.